I'm Matt Dicken, and this is Strategic Wealth. On today's show,
what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month?
we will probably have several more years of this just kind of slow growth. Don't go it alone. All right, if this decision is going to impact both you and your spouse, then both of you should be present. That's just a little bit of what you're going to see right now. Hello and welcome to today's show. I'm your host, Matt Dicken. Thanks again for tuning in. We've got another great show coming to you this week. As usual, we're going to be answering your questions. We're going to take a peek at what we've talked about in the past on the radio show, and we're going to give you some great financial tips that you can use both now and as we move into the future. So why don't we go ahead and get started with this week's Money Minute. This week I want to talk a little bit about who can you believe and who can you trust, especially when it comes to your money. You know, of course, we've all heard of Bernie Madoff. Unfortunately, there's other crooks and criminals out there looking to scam people or rip people off, especially when it comes to our finances. So one of the things that I always encourage individuals to do is really a couple of different things. Number one, don't do business with a company that takes custody of your assets. That's really how you can protect yourself from the next Ponzi scheme that might come down the road. What this means is don't do business with companies that actually take control of your assets. Now what that means is typically when you invest money with a company, they might use a third-party firm like maybe Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, Scottrade. There's a lot of different ones that are out there. But what you don't want to do is necessarily do business with a firm that actually takes custody of your assets. What Bernie Madoff was doing is when individuals invested money with him, the money was actually on deposit with his company. When you got a statement from him, it was his firm or his name on those statements. Some individuals even went so far to just write him a personal check. And he told them that he would be depositing it into their accounts, and of course we all learned that he wasn't doing that. So try to avoid companies that actually take custody of your assets. Do business with companies that actually use a third-party entity so there's a separation. The individual or the company can't necessarily get their hands directly on your money. Now another thing that I always recommend is to do business with a member of the National Ethics Association. You know, if we go back to Bernie Madoff once again, there were a lot of warning signs. There was a lot of things that individuals could have found out about him before investing money with him. If you do business with a member of the National Ethics Association, you're going to note their background has been vetted and cleared of any of these horrible things that we hear about and read about all too often. I'm a member of the National Ethics Association, and what that means is that I go through a full-blown background check every 12 months. Now, of course, through the year, they're doing spot checks along the way. And if anything were to ever change in my background, then I would lose my membership. So basically what this means is if I had ever been sued by a client for something not going the right way, or let's say I had a client complain about something not working out the way that I promised it was supposed to work out, that would prevent me from being a member of the National Ethics Association. They even take it a step further, and they'll take a look at my personal life. So if I had issues in my past, such as a company filing bankruptcy, or I had other criminal problems in my past, all of those types of things would prevent me from being a member of the National Ethics Association. And one of the really good things about this particular organization is in addition to looking at what clients have said about me or maybe what my personal life looks like, they also take a look at what regulators say about the work that we do as well. So let's say I were ever fined or sanctioned, suspended. Let's say I had a slap on the wrist for a minor infraction at some point in my career. Any of those types of things would prevent me from being a member of the National Ethics Association. So if you don't do business with companies that take custody of your assets and you work with a member of the National Ethics Association, you're going to feel pretty confident that you can trust that individual and that what they're doing with your money is going to be prudent and correct. And that's this week's Money Minute. Now it's time for our Facebook poll question of the week. And that is, has your financial advisor helped you weather the recession? Yes or no? As usual, we took this question out to the street. I think you're going to be pretty interested in seeing what people's responses were when we asked them this question.
Due to healthcare costs, no.
Well, we haven't really seen much of him.
Yes, I have a real good financial advisor. It's my sister, and she's pretty smart, and so far, we're doing okay.
He hasn't a clue.
Oh, yes.
As you can see, a lot of people have different feelings and opinions about this particular question. Now, if you answered the question no, your advisor has not helped you in this current recession, you're certainly not alone. A recent study that was done by Senior Market Advisors said that 71% of investors in this country today are seeking a second opinion. So if you don't feel like your advisor has helped you in the current recession, it might be time, if you haven't done so already, to seek a second opinion and get a second set of eyes to take a look at your finances. Because you only get one shot at getting your retirement plan done right. There's no reset button, there's no do-over. So that was a look at this week's poll question, which again can be found on our Facebook page. And while you're there, if you haven't done so already, please like us. We're at Ask Matt Dicken there on Facebook. Each and every week, what we're doing is listing at least one, sometimes two articles that might be of interest for you. We're going to continue to have polls, and we'd really like your feedback. That's a great place that you can leave us a comment or a question you might have about the show or anything else financially related.
You're watching Strategic Wealth with Matt Dicken. It's Smart Money Television. Come see Matt live and discover what millions of safety-conscious Americans are doing now to protect and preserve their assets and make up for market losses. Will recent legislation changes affect your retirement? Can you safeguard your assets from unnecessary taxation? Can you find growth and security without risk in today's volatile market? Due to overwhelming demand for these events and very limited seating, we recommend that you call today, 855-MATT-DICKEN. That's 855-MATT-DICKEN, or go to AskMattDicken.com. You're watching Strategic Wealth with Matt Dicken. It's Smart Money Television.
Now it's time once again for our Man on the Street segment, where we go out around town and ask you questions, and then I get to answer them here on the show. Now we've been going out around town, various locations. Our film crew's been getting a lot of great questions from individuals. We really appreciate it, and we're going to continue to do this for you.
What's going to happen tomorrow, next week, next month? I mean, I think that's probably the number one financial question for lots of people. Hopefully things are getting better. I mean, I certainly hope that's the trend.
Yeah, you know, that's kind of the sentiment of a lot of individuals that I talk to. They feel like things might be getting a little bit better, but they're just concerned. They're not really sure what the future will hold. And although nobody can really do a very good job of predicting the future, because nobody has a crystal ball, neither do we, but I think if you look at some historical trends, you would see that we will probably have several more years of this just kind of slow growth. You know, we've talked about the history of the economy and the history of the stock market here on the show in the past. And what we found is if you take a look at the stock market, it usually takes anywhere from 15 to maybe 18 years to really work themselves out of particular cycles. And right now, we've been in a period of about 10, 11, 12 years with little to no growth from the market. Unfortunately, if history is any indicator, it tells us that it'll be an additional 4, 5, 6, maybe 8 years before we really get out of the mess that we're in currently and things really start to break out and get a whole lot better. So I think this year probably is going to be pretty similar to last year. We'll have some growth, albeit it's very slow. Now, certain sectors are doing very good, but the overall economy still has the drag of unemployment remaining high. You know, housing hasn't fixed itself or repaired itself yet. You know, individuals really aren't out there spending money like they used to. So I think we're going to continue to struggle as we move forward. Now, if you're closer into retirement, what this means is that you really need to be cautious with your money. You don't want to rely on the stock market growing and going up in value like it did maybe in the 80s and the 90s. You need to maybe take a look at taking a little bit of risk off the table, maybe using some things that will be a little more predictable, but still return a reasonable rate of return. We look for things that are paying anywhere from 6, 7, 8, in some cases 9% interest. You know, maybe you wouldn't really ever earn anything more than that, but you shouldn't really worry about losing anything. So those are some steps that you should take because nobody can predict the future. What you want to do is kind of hope things do get better. I hope things get better, but we've got to be realistic about it. It's probably going to take several more years before we really work our way out of the mess that we're in currently.
It's tax season, and I don't think I did so good in 2011 in regards to keeping track of taxes and really not trying to owe anything when it comes around the time. So I think it's just, you know, throughout the year, what little things can you do as far as donations, anything like that, just so you can draw back a greater return at the end of the year.
Now, I think everybody always likes to learn about ideas or ways that they can reduce the amount of income taxes that they're paying each year. So we get this type of question all the time. You know, one thing that I encourage individuals to do is take a look at their tax returns. Now, everybody's situation is going to be a little different, but if you take a look at your tax returns, pay specific attention to how much taxable interest that you have. You know, if you have an account such as a CD or maybe just a regular taxable mutual fund or money market, anything like that that's generating some sort of interest or growth, that goes directly to your tax return, and whatever interest that you earn, you got to pay taxes at the end of the year on it at whatever federal, state, and local tax bracket that you're in. So if you have taxable interest there on your tax return, what you need to do is go back and identify which accounts are creating that taxable interest. And if it's an account that you're not counting on living on the interest that it's generating, then you typically want to move that money into a tax-deferred or even better, a tax-free environment. You don't ever want to pay taxes on income or on interest that you're not using to live on. So if you have other sources of income, you don't want to have to pay tax on this type of interest. So one thing that everybody can typically do to reduce the amount of taxes they have to pay at the end of the year is to maybe move CD money or savings account money or taxable mutual funds into a more tax-efficient environment so that money will grow tax-free or tax-deferred. And that's it for this week's Man on the Street segment. And keep in mind, again, if you see our film crews around town, please ask them any questions that you might have. It really helps us out. And now it's time for this week's Tip of the Week. In this week's tip, I want to talk a little bit about emergency funds. A question I get all the time from individuals is how much money should I set aside for any unforeseen emergency that might come up in the future? Now there's different schools of thought on this, but I typically recommend that you hold at least 6 months worth of living expenses in an emergency account. Now, one of the things that you can do when you're calculating what your living expenses are, eliminate things such as money that you're maybe setting aside in your 401k plan, or maybe money that you want to set aside for family vacations or any other luxury items. If you find yourself in an emergency, you don't necessarily have to account for those types of things. So what you want to do is make sure you have at least 6 months worth of living expenses in an account that you can get your hands on quickly. Now, things that might qualify as an emergency fund will be things like obviously a checking account, savings accounts, money market accounts. You can maybe even use a CD that doesn't have any penalties for taking an early withdrawal. What you usually wouldn't want to count as an emergency fund is maybe an employer-sponsored retirement plan where there's going to be penalties if you access the money early, or anything else that has a time horizon connected to it. You need to keep this money liquid. Now, when you keep money liquid, it means that your returns are going to be pretty low, but that's okay, because what you're going to have is good access to those funds if you need it in case of an emergency, and we hope to never have an emergency, but you got to make sure that that money is there when you need it. One thing that I usually recommend to individuals, let's say that you're just starting out, or you don't have 6 months worth of living expenses in an emergency fund. Another option could potentially be to establish a home equity line of credit on your house, and that's assuming that you might have some equity. Now, I'm not recommending that you go out and get into all kinds of debt, but if you have equity in your house, you can establish one of these equity lines of credit. Depending on the bank, they might charge you $50 or $75 per year if you never use it, and you don't plan on using it. It's just there in case you have an emergency. But that can be used as a safety net until you build up that safety net, and then maybe you can eliminate or cancel the home equity line of credit. We don't want you using your house as a piggy bank, but if there's no other options, you got to get the money from somewhere. And I recommend establishing this home equity line of credit prior to the emergency coming up. I've had individuals that have told me in the past that, well, if I were to lose my job, that's okay, I've got equity in my house. Well, if you lost your job and then you go to the bank and ask them to establish this equity line of credit, they're probably going to turn you down because you don't have any income, you don't have any way of paying them back. So get it established before it's too late. And that's one way that you can solve the problem of not having enough liquid assets set aside if something were to happen. So a minimum of 6 months is what you want. 12 months is even better. And that's the tip of the week. A few weeks back on the radio show, we talked about how to find the right advice givers. And last week we brought you part 1 of that segment, and now we're going to bring to you part 2.
You know, Matt, for our listeners who have requested this report, the feedback has been phenomenal. They love it. There are great answers. Almost any question they could possibly have is answered with this kit. You know, we talked a little about it earlier. What other sort of things are in there that our folks need to know about?
Well, Mark, we have several different sections. Another section that we haven't talked about yet are some questions to maybe ask the advisor. And here's one of the first suggestions that I typically have for you is don't go it alone. All right, if this decision is going to impact both you and your spouse, then both of you should be present. If you maybe are a widow or a widower, maybe ask an adult child to attend with you as well. They don't necessarily have to make the decision, but they should at least be there to hear what the individual has to say. Also, if it sounds too good to be true, usually what? It usually is, right? So if someone's talking about unbelievable returns or get-rich-quick type of things, or money-back guarantees within 30 or 90 days, any of those types of things should be a red flag. Okay. Another great question I ask them is, are they a true advisor? You got to watch out for, make sure that you're not getting financial advice from non-financial advisors. And what this means is there's a lot of CPAs, maybe insurance agents, maybe a lot of attorneys that want to give you advice. But if they're not certified and qualified, then really the advice they are giving you are just opinions.
Matt, that's a big deal, because we get that a lot here, where certain professionals are giving them advice, and they do not hold a license in any of those areas to give advice. And I think if it was the other way around, I'm not going to give somebody legal advice because I'm not an attorney. So that is something that we get a lot. Well, my attorney said this, my CPA said that, and you have to ask, what are your credentials?
Yeah. Another thing to watch out for is beware of online resources. Mark, if you go to Google, if you go to Google today and type in the words retirement planning, you're going to get about 65 million different websites that you can visit and read through. And by the time you're done reading all that information, you'll be dead, right? Because no one could ever go through all of that info and decipher all of it. So you have to be very, very careful. A lot of the information that's out there on the web might be biased, might be written by somebody that maybe had a bad experience, but doesn't necessarily mean everybody will have a bad experience. So be very, very careful that you don't put too much weight into what you see on the internet, because basically anybody, whether they're qualified or not, anybody can go out and start a blog or post on a forum opinions or comments about investing or retirement planning, and you really don't know, is that a true qualified professional? Is it an 8-year-old sitting behind a computer, or somebody that has some sort of a hidden agenda?
Sure, and I recall one of your colleagues, I believe in Pennsylvania, was saying that if you're looking for a great oatmeal cookie recipe, well, then Google it. But if you're looking for sophisticated financial advice, Google is not the place to go. And in fact, I think the term is being Google slapped when you put something in there and 19 million possibilities come up.
Now, the next thing you should do is demand proof of what they're telling you. If they say that they're a retirement expert, look for proof. How many books have they written? How many authors or how many publications have they had articles that have appeared in them? How much money do they spend on investing in their own training to keep up with continuing education? Do they just go to the minimum required number of classes each year, or do they travel the country looking for information? Do they have a radio show? Do they appear on the news as an expert? There's clues that you can look for as a consumer to see if you're dealing with somebody that's a true professional, or maybe somebody that, quite frankly, is just trying to act like a true professional. And then, of course, the last thing in this particular section that we cover is follow your gut. Okay, trust your feelings. If somebody just feels like they're maybe a little too slick for you, maybe it's time to go out and get another opinion, or certainly investigate interviewing another advisor.
And Matt, let's say I'm going out there and I'm interviewing advisors. How many is a good number? Should I do 2 or 3? And you talk about that gut feeling. Should that play a big role in it? Because sometimes the gut can be wrong.
Yeah, it's sometimes all it really takes is one interview to find somebody that you really feel comfortable in working with. Other times you might need to interview 4, 5, or 6. So that's something that's just going to kind of be personal preference. If you have one advisor that you've worked with for 10, 20, 15 years, it probably makes sense to at least go out and get a second opinion just to double check and see if there's anything available that you weren't already aware of.
Matt, with this kit, what are some of the other points that you think they really need to know when selecting the right advice giver?
Well, I think that you should know what to expect when you're going to have your first appointment with an advisor. Sometimes individuals feel like it's kind of like going to the doctor. They're not really sure what's going to happen. So they should be able to provide you information as far as what are you going to be required to share with them or bring to that appointment in order for it to be a meaningful sit-down conversation that you have with them. So what to expect in that first appointment. When we meet with somebody in our office for the first time, it's basically just a casual conversation. We want to get to know them a little bit better and see if we can really provide any value for them and really see if they need us as an advisor. They might be working with somebody that they're happy with, that's doing a great job for them, and they don't need our help.
So should you beware of an advisor that's too pushy on that first consultation, saying you need to do this and you need to do it now? Should you kind of be a little bit leery of that?
Well, Mark, I don't think it matters whether it's the first meeting with them or the 10th meeting with them. Anytime they start getting pushy and trying to put pressure on you to do something that you're maybe a little bit uncomfortable in doing, it's probably time to move on and interview someone else.
Mm-hmm. What else is in there that they need to know about?
Well, really, the last section is that we have in the kit, which, again, anybody that would like it can contact the office and request it from us. We're happy to send it out to you, is information on a complete planning review. If you go talk to an advisor, you don't want to talk with somebody that's kind of like a one-trick pony. You want them to take a look at everything: retirement planning, taxes, wills and trusts, fees and expenses, long-term care needs, legacy planning. You want to make sure that they have a background and experience in dealing with all of these different areas, because you don't want to have 10 or 15 different advisors that you have to go to for things. You want to have one consolidated source that can really help you guide yourself through this maze of retirement planning.
Folks, if you'd like to get a copy of that kit, How to Select the Right Advice Giver, it's real simple. Just contact the office. You're listening to The Matt Dicken Show, where safe money is smart money. You're watching Strategic Wealth with Matt Dicken. It's Smart Money Television. Come see Matt live and discover what millions of safety-conscious Americans are doing now to protect and preserve their assets and make up for market losses. Will recent legislation changes affect your retirement? Can you safeguard your assets from unnecessary taxation? Can you find growth and security without risk in today's volatile market? Due to overwhelming demand for these events and very limited seating, we recommend that you call today, 855-MATT-DICKEN. That's 855-MATT-DICKEN, or go to AskMattDicken.com. You're watching Strategic Wealth with Matt Dicken. It's Smart Money Television.
And now it's time for our AskMattDicken.com segment, where you get a chance to go to our website and submit any question that you might have, and then I'll answer it here on the show, or at least send you an email back with a response. We really appreciate your questions. We're getting a lot of wonderful questions, and here's this week's mix. Let's see what questions you had for us this week. Mark, what's the first one?
Matt, our first question is from Quinn in Louisville. Quinn writes, I'm investing more in my 401k than my company match. Is that a good idea?
Well, it's certainly not a bad idea, but it might not be the best thing for you to do. You know, we always recommend that individuals invest in their company's retirement plans at least up to the match. That's free money. There's nothing that we can do that's better than that. So you always want to take full advantage of that. But if you're putting more money over and above what the company matches, not a bad idea. It might not just be the best place. In some cases, you're better off going ahead and taking that money out, going ahead and paying the tax on it today, and maybe investing those dollars in a Roth IRA. That way you're going to have some pre-tax money and some post-tax money that'll give you more options in the future once you retire. So it's not a bad thing to do, just might not be the best thing to do, but what I would encourage you to do is talk to a professional and decide what works best for you.
Charles from Pee Wee Valley writes, do all financial advisors charge you for their time?
No, Charles, not all financial advisors charge for their time. Some do. What some individuals will do is just work on an hourly rate, or maybe you'll pay them a fee to put together a financial plan or something of that nature. But there's lots of advisors that you can talk to that don't charge. We're one of those advisors. Individuals can come into the office. We give a free consultation where they can ask any questions that they might have, and we'll see if we can provide any value. But typically, if you are going to get charged for their time, you're going to know that up front. Most advisors will tell you what their hourly rate is, or maybe what their consultation rate is. So you should know that before you even go into the appointment. But not all of them charge, but of course some do. Everybody's just a little different.
Our next question is from Paige in St. Matthews. She writes, I'm already retired. Is it too late to get a second opinion?
Well, Paige, I don't ever think it's too late to get a second opinion, nor is it ever too early. But especially once somebody goes into or is close to retirement, I think it's absolutely urgent that you do get a second opinion. Now, Paige, I don't know how long you've been retired, but if you're early in your retirement, typically those first 5 years are absolutely crucial. Unfortunately, I'll meet with individuals in my office all the time that have maybe been retired for 15 or 20 years, something of that nature, and now all of a sudden their monthly income is not high enough to cover all of their monthly expenses. And unfortunately, once you find yourself in that situation, there's little to nothing that can be done other than to reduce your overall living expenses, which means, of course, you have to reduce your standard of living and your lifestyle. So if you've recently retired, that's a great time. That's probably one of the most important times that you can actually go out and get a second opinion, because it's going to be the decisions that you make during the first few years of your retirement that will determine if you're going to have money that will last you forever, or you might find yourself in one of these unfortunate situations where as you get on in years and on in age, you're not able to have the type of lifestyle that you'd hope to have.
Matt, our next question is from Jason in New Albany. He writes, who manages a mutual fund?
Well, typically a mutual fund is going to be run by maybe one fund manager, or in some cases there will be a collection of fund managers. So these are professionals that this is really all they do. It's not typically a financial advisor. There's some out there that do that. But usually it's a specialist that's all they do. They run one particular fund. Occasionally you'll see them managing more than one, but it's typically just one fund, and they make all of the investment decisions. Now, of course, they're going to typically have a team. They'll have analysts and other individuals that are doing research for them. But in most cases, when you look at a mutual fund, it's run by only one person, in some cases 2 or 3. But I think of the roughly 10,000 funds that are out there, usually all the investment decisions are left up to one person. Now, the problem with this can arise is, let's say you have a good mutual fund that has really good performance. What happens a lot of times is that fund manager will be courted away, and the reason why that fund performed well has left, and now it's working for the next fund family. Of course, the fund that just lost this all-star fund manager is not going to notify you and tell you that the reason why the fund performed so well has kind of left the building and gone on to a competitor. So it is important, if you find a fund manager that you like, you have to kind of try and follow them and do the research and see which funds they're actually managing, because they don't always stay in one place. Mark, do you have any others for me?
Matt, that's a wrap.
Well, great. Once again, I've really enjoyed answering those questions. Hopefully you found something there of value that you can use. What I want you to do is make sure, if you have any questions about anything that you've heard here today, please check us out online, listen to our weekly radio show, and be sure to tune in again next week. We'll be right back here again, same time, same channel. And we have a very special show that we're working on. You're not going to want to miss it. So thank you for watching Strategic Wealth with Matt Dicken. And keep in mind, retirement planning is a journey, not a destination.
You're watching Strategic Wealth with Matt Dicken. It's Smart Money Television. Come see Matt live and discover what millions of safety-conscious Americans are doing now to protect and preserve their assets and make up for market losses. Will recent legislation changes affect your retirement? Can you safeguard your assets from unnecessary taxation? Can you find growth and security without risk in today's volatile market? Due to overwhelming demand for these events and very limited seating, we recommend that you call today, 855-MATT-DICKEN. That's 855-MATT-DICKEN, or go to AskMattDicken.com. You're watching Strategic Wealth with Matt Dicken. It's Smart Money Television.